Hey, welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with it's the interview series presented by WFPK at WFPK.org, Consequence, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Thank you, as always, for making your way here and checking out the series. You know what to do. You like what you see, hit that subscribe button. Do 3 new interviews every single week. It's a great way to keep up with all of your favorite artists. And I got to tell you, it is once again a pleasure today to be talking with Graham Nash. Hello, sir.
Kyle, how are you doing?
I'm doing great over here, and especially since I've been enjoying this brand new live album that you've got, and what you're doing here. So let's jump into this, because a beautiful set, and you've taken your first 2 solo albums, right? It's talking about Songs for Beginners and Wild Tales. What brought this on? Why was this the time to do this?
I'm 80 years old now. I've always loved those 2 albums, and I've always tried to find out what people liked about those albums. And what I get invariably is that, you know, it was recorded very simply. It's not like, you know, 1,000 people singing with me and dancing in the background and orchestras. It's just a very simple album. And I've always loved both of those albums. And my wife, Amy, actually said, you know, I'd like to see a show like that. I'd like to see that. I'm a fan. I'd like to see that. And so she's mainly responsible for this double album. And we only recorded 4 shows.
Wow.
And I took the best, and it was with a band I had never played with before. I only had 3 days of rehearsing. Now, they had the records, so that they understood what the general feel was going to be like, but it was a band that I'd never played with, you know, except for a few days. And apart from 2 mistakes on my part, one on my harmonica and one on the electric piano on a song, there's no overdubs on the album.
Wow.
It's purely live.
Just the way you really want that. And what a tightrope walk to be. Well, not a tightrope, a trust fall, I think, is what I'm looking for there. You know, for a group of musicians like that.
Yeah. It was a delightful experience, and I was really amazed with just how well everybody was playing.
Yeah. Well, when you go back, I mean, these 2 records, Songs for Beginners, Wild Tales, I mean, this was your, I don't know if leap is the right word, but it was your leap into the solo world. You know, you'd been with the bands before that. Did that feel, well, how did that feel at the time?
It felt great, and the reason why I had to do it was because, you know, we were all writing a great deal of, you know, all of us, you know, me and David and Stephen and Neil, you know, all writing all the time. But when CSN is not making an album, and CSNY is not making an album, and Crosby Nash is not making an album, what do you do with all those songs? And I had, indeed, Songs for Beginners was my very first solo record. So I had saved up some songs, you know, and because there was no outlet for them, I had to do a solo record.
Yeah, it's hilarious that you're mentioning 3 versions of a band right there, and still there's time to fit this in, because you were so busy at this time, and the output. I mean, we talk about CSNY as one of the greatest groups of all time for obvious reasons. You know, to say that, you know, those albums are masterpieces, and then there are enough masterpieces left over to make more masterpieces from all of you all. I mean, that's incredible. It's nearly insane.
It is, you know, Crosby was making If I Could Only Remember My Name, which is, of course, a brilliant album. Neil had just put out After the Gold Rush, you know, and Stephen had Manassas, you know, making great records. Yeah, we had a lot of music to make, and that's how we did it.
Yeah. Well, obviously there was a lot of things to talk about. You know, you've mentioned this before about how unfortunate how many of these songs are still relevant today. The set kicks off with Military Madness, and it is right there from the beginning. Here's where we are. This comes out at a time where Russia is being fuckheads like usual, the government anyway, I should say. And so, you know, obviously when you did this record, this wasn't exactly the case. This wasn't happening, but here we are again. What does this song say for the moments, if it's anything different than it's ever said?
it's incredibly important to me that we have not learned from history. And it's a cliche, and I know that, but it's true. We have not learned from history. I just finished a 22 show tour, and I had to change the beginning of my tour every single night to reflect what was going on. I started my tour with Find the Cost of Freedom, and then played Military Madness, having told the audience, look, I know normally you come out and I do, Wasted on the Way, something familiar, let you all sit down in your seats, get you comfortable, etc. I says, but you know what? As we're doing this, people are being killed and slaughtered. So I must change the beginning of my show. And I did. And I will continue to do that as long as this insane war continues.
Yeah. And you get those moments too. I mean, those moments where you take the past and you put it in the present. I mean, on this record, we hear grave concern. You updated the audio and the songs, right? I mean,
yes.
I mean, and that's got to be in the old folk tradition, I guess. But how often do you find that you take those moments and you're like, oh, all we got to do is change a little bits, and here we are.
Yeah, it is incredible how relevant some of my songs really, really do seem, even after all these years.
Yeah. When do you notice that? I mean, are there some songs that lend to that more than others to be able to give them a little bit of an update?
Yes, the prison song. I wrote that about my father going off to prison when I was, I think 13 or 14 years old. And the second verse is about a friend of mine who tried to sell a pound of cocaine to the FBI. Not a good thing. And so she went to prison also. But yes, and Military Madness. I mean, what are there? A dozen wars going on in the world right now. The main one being, of course, the attack against Ukraine. Yeah, I realize I must have pinned something that is longer than the song itself, or what I was saying in the song. What I was doing, I was taking the very essence of what I wanted to say and make it apply to everybody forever.
Mm-hmm.
That I mean, I'm speaking metaphorically, of course, but that's what I want to do with my music. I want people to be able to think and be able to shake their ass also.
Yeah. Camil is a great version of that too, because here you have something that's sort of specifically about this one person in history. But when I listen to that song now, that's just as powerful as Masters of War from Dylan. Any of those, like, I still get those same feelings.
What an incredible compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, that's just to hear that stuff. It is an interesting moment in there. As on this live album, I should say, as you're reflecting these older albums, because you follow Military Madness with Better Days, like,
yes,
right in we like, I don't know what I'm getting at here. That's just putting the track list together. In the original days, was that purposeful? Do you remember?
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to do it exactly like the record. That's why there's no talking on the record, except at the beginning, where I welcome everybody and thank them for coming, and at the very end of Wild Tales, I say goodnight. I don't talk I wanted it to be like the record, but live.
Yeah. And the way that tells the story, for better and worse, in those moments, it's
Indeed.
Just the way it stands up 50 years later. It's incredible. And there are the lighter moments too, like Sleep Song is one of the most beautiful songs that I feel like that's ever been created right there. Take me back to that one, because we're talking about the heavier stuff. Let's go back to a lighter moment. Take me back to writing that one. What do you remember?
I wrote that for my first wife, Rose. I had a dream that she was leaving me. She wasn't, in actuality, she wasn't, but in my dream, she was leaving me. And I saw the back of her dress as she slipped through the door, Yeah, I think it's, once again, an incredibly simple song. There's only 3 chords in it. And I learned that from Buddy Holly. If you knew 3 chords, you could play most of Buddy's songs. So I love Sleep Song. On the original record, I did the solo on a toilet tissue on a comb, and hummed through it, to create that strange sound.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that song. It's a very personal favorite.
And you do, I mean, you're so poetic just in about everything. You're poetic in the way you talk about war. I mean, I bring up O Camil again. And you're so poetic when you talk about your partners. Your first wife. It's also been said about Joni, the songs about Joni that are on these records. And that's sort of interesting too, because you may have had so many relationships in your life, but that's the one that keeps coming back. And of course, because of rock lore, you know,
Indeed.
was there a moment that you had to sort of, I don't know if you even had to make peace with that? Like, you know what, I'm always going to be connected to that one relationship.
No, I knew once I was in love with Joni that I would be in love with Joni for the rest of my life. She's an incredible woman, of course, and a great songwriter and great painter also. I understand, because of the Laurel Canyon folklore that you were mentioning before, I understand that people put Joni and I together in this incredibly fabulous relationship, and it really was. But it was only for just over a couple of years,
Yeah.
and it was 50 years ago. But on her birthday, I have sent her a bunch of roses every year.
That's beautiful. It really is. That's beautiful. She's featured. You also have a book I want to bring up. I fall in love with this photo book that you put out called A Life in Focus. And you take you feature these gorgeous photos you've taken of all of your friends, including Joni. There's one of Judy Collins kissing Stephen Stills, and I just kept coming back to that over and over and over.
That was a beautiful moment. You see, I try to be invisible. I don't like people showing me that face, when you know that there's a camera pointed at you, because I've experienced that all my life. Mm-hmm. I know when people are taking pictures, and you always want to look like James Dean and, Tony Curtis or what, right? You're always trying to put your best face forward, whatever that is. But I don't like those moments. I like to take pictures when my subjects have no idea that I'm there.
And sure enough,
and can't give me that face.
Yeah. But I wonder about when they hear that click, like, Judy and Stephen, like, here they are in this moment. And inevitably, I mean, because photographs, one of the things I've always loved about them, I'm going to say something very obvious here, is you catch that one moment, but there's always the moments leading up to it and the moments right afterwards. When you talk about that face, I always find it funny when you see people taking selfies as a group and everybody lines up and they get ready and they shoot it. And the moment they take that picture, their face just falls and everybody walks away. In those moments, like when you take these moments to be invisible, such a pure moment like that. Do you remember the moment afterwards? Do they look Absolutely. Up going, what the hell, dude?
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to press the trigger at the right time many times. And Cartier-Bresson, a great French photographer, of course, who coined the term, the decisive moment. And that's the moment when you press that trigger. That's the moment. And that's what I'm always trying to capture, is the moment. And I did it with Judy kissing Stephen. They had no clue that I was witnessing that moment, but I had my camera.
Yeah. You say, as you mentioned here several times in the book, about, needing to be invisible to capture these moments, which is also incredible because you're such a persona in yourself. Like, how difficult is that for you to be that invisible?
It's easy because I've changed my image totally. My friend Crosby has been kind of trapped in his image of David Crosby for the last 50 years. People come up to me and ask me if that's Crosby. Okay. And I go on my way.
Not so much capture. Yeah, that's really interesting. That is really interesting. And all of those folks in here, I mean, you've got all your band members featured in various, again, it's just beautiful. The reflections that you catch. And I mean, reflections, like, it seems like you like reflections as well.
I do. Yeah. I do. I was having a show in Berlin, in Germany, one year. And I had a lot of self-portraits in there. And as you say, most of them are reflections in broken glass, in cracked mirrors, those kind of things. This lady came up to me and she said, "Could I say something to you?" I said, "Absolutely, ma'am. How can I help you?" She said, "You should have your head examined." And I said, what? She said, you're very disturbed. You should have your head examined. Look at all these self-portraits. They're all completely destroyed. Your image is like weird. You should have your head. And I thought, wow, should I have my head examined? I mean, I don't know.
Well, there's such beautiful photos, for whatever reason. If that's the reason, it makes great art. So what can you say there?
There's beauty. There's beauty everywhere, Kyle.
Yeah, I believe you. I agree with you. There's a line also in this book, in this photo book that you put in there. When I look at the photos, I realize how intense my partners are, as you're talking about a lot of your CSNY band members right there. When history goes on, and we've all heard the stories, at least the public parts of it, about how, the arguments or whatever does that change your relationship with these photos in itself?
No, because the image is an entity into itself. I can't argue with the pictures I took of Neil. That straight on photograph I took of him where he's looking at you with those Neil eyes. Holy shit, do I know those eyes? I've seen those eyes many, many times, and it was nice for me to be able to, for him to trust me to take that shot. He knew what I was doing, and he knew that he trusted me enough that I wouldn't put a bad image out of him. My partners trusted me. It wasn't a big deal that I had my camera with me all most of the time. It didn't faze them at all.
It's just so interesting. And again, I'm sure I'm saying this as a fan, in many of the way the fans have been captivated by that group, by your ups and downs and your ins and outs when the group's together and when the group's not together. But the way you talk about it, it always still sounds like, to be cliche, like a family.
They're my brothers. I never had any brothers. I had two sisters. One of them passed away a few years ago, but I never had any brothers. These kids are my brothers. I mean, and as brothers, sometimes we argue. Sometimes we don't see things the same way. Sometimes we think we should do it a different way. This song, we're like family. Exactly what you said. We are family, and I think that Crosby, Stills and Nash and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young are completely different bands. Completely.
How so?
Well, let's take the first Crosby, Stills and Nash record and Deja Vu. With the first Crosby, Stills and Nash record, it's full of sunshine. It's full of Laurel Canyon. It's full of romance. It's full of me and David and Stephen making our three voices into one voice with what we consider to be really good songs. I was in love with Joni and living with Joni. Stephen was with Judy Collins, and David was with his girlfriend Christine. It was a sunshiny album, and it sounded like that. Okay, now we've got Neil, and now we're doing Deja Vu. I'm no longer with Joan. Stephen is no longer with Judy, and Christine had unfortunately, tragically been killed in an automobile accident. Very different vibe, extremely different, not so sunny at all. Maybe Teach Your Children is a little sunny, but the rest of it, it's us with Neil. He brings, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but he brings a certain darkness to our music, whereas ours was sunny and flowery and la 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 and in tune and one voice, etc. In Deja Vu, we were incredibly respectful of Neil. We understood that he was a great songwriter and a really good singer and an incredible guitar player, of course, but definitely different bands, completely.
Did that continue like that? Do you see it like that as it continued through the years and the decades when Neil would come in and out, the darkness would come and go?
Yep. And what a lot of people don't realize is that the first Crosby, Stills and Nash live show, with a first set and an intermission and a second set, 7 years after the first record. 7 years.
Yeah.
Everything else was with Neil.
Geez, that's right. No, I wouldn't have put that together. That's a, it's it, and of course, you get the present day, and I just want to bring this up real quick too, because as again we talk about the ins and outs, and it ends up being that while you all might not be creating music together right now, it was a cause, and I say Spotify, that did bring you back together, and suddenly there's that family again, standing up for each other. You
Yes.
pull your music off there. What was the backstory there? If you can talk about that, the decision to pull that music, how did that all come about?
It came about because for the last several years, our partner, David Crosby, has been railing on our behalf against Spotify, against a billion-dollar company that only plays other people's music and pays them very, very little. So Crosby has been on this Spotify rant for at least a couple of years. And then when Joe Rogan came on and gave all that disinformation and misinformation about COVID and masks and encouraging anti-vaccinations and encouraging people not to wear masks, that became too much for us. And as soon as Neil did that, we, of course, wanted to do exactly the same thing. Neil has probably lost a lot of money because his streaming royalties are enormous. Mm. He has made 80,000 records, and therefore you can stream Neil Young for months. And that's a very valuable commodity. I understand that. But it just shows you that Neil Young is a true musician. He really only responds when it really feels right to him. Mm-hmm. And we all know that about Neil. Sometimes it gets uncomfortable. I mean, if he wants to book a tour of Europe and, for 6 weeks, and then a week before decides it doesn't feel right and cancels, there's a lot of people that are out of a job then, because they can't then get on tour with another band because the other bands have filled up their roster too, but I do respect Neil's dedication to the muse of music. He's completely that way. If it feels right for Neil, he'll be there for days. If it doesn't, he left yesterday.
It was so amazing, commendable to see you all just walk away. I sort of liken it in my head to, Pearl Jam walking away from MTV in the 90s or something. I mean, you're because for whatever however you want to say it, Spotify is sort of the closest we come to a monoculture these days in the music world. And just to be able to take your bags and say, I'm leaving here, and so many artists were saying, if I could, I would, that they didn't have the luxury of having the rights that you all did. But it, now that it's been a few months, what do you I mean, where are we with this? Can there still be a change? Is it going to push through?
I think that we're going to be stuck with this COVID disease for probably the next several years. This mask mandate that was just banned by this lady lawyer in Florida. A lot of her friends say that she isn't even qualified to make that kind of a decision. And then, of course, all the late night comedians are saying, should we have this one judge, from Florida, dictate the health of America? It's a very sad situation. And I think that we're going to be stuck with COVID for a few years. I personally will wear my mask anytime I'm outside my apartment. I test myself every other day. I'm doing fine so far. Yeah. I am 80 years old. I do, realize that, my age group is quite vulnerable, but I'm trying my best to stay as healthy as I can.
And you're going to go out on tour, right? I mean, is there more touring?
I just finished a tour about a week and a half ago, and I'm going out again in July.
Yeah. So I know it's got to be, stressful, I'm sure, or just having that extra weight.
Yeah, but those are the new rules, and part of these new rules when I'm on tour is that I don't see anybody backstage. Normally, I have friends in most cities, and I give them tickets and I give them backstage passes and we talk and bullshit and la 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 la. No one. I saw no one on this tour. not one person that wasn't safe, vaccinated, boosted, and taking care of themselves.
Yeah, it's the way we got to do it. You're absolutely right.
I'm afraid so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's great hearing that you're back out there doing it again. I mean, the 2022 tour, of course, playing your solo cuts, playing the CSN hits, playing Hollies. I know you did a few of those for the WFPK while you were here in Louisville last time. I mean, just it's these songs are amazing. And by the way, I say this, I'm in Louisville. We're going into Derby week or Derby time. It's like a month long, and there is a picture in the book that, again, it's just a great book, A Life in Focus. and you're at the Derby, and it's Alice Cooper. You're next to Alice Cooper, and Philip Seymour Hoffman is right there in the background.
Yeah. And also, I never bet on it. I've never bet in my life on a horse, but I was there in Louisville, and it was my ex-wife and I's wedding anniversary on May 4th, and it was just unbelievable to see that. And so I placed a bet, and so I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So I'm looking at all the horses, and we were in the middle of the Afghan war, right? So I look on down, I go, ooh, war emblem. I'll put $100 on war emblem, and I won like $2,200. It was really funny in a way.
Yeah. Well, congrats. I've won one Derby in my entire life, and I think I was 12 when that happened. So it's
oh boy, yeah.
It's not easy to do. That is a great moment in the book, and again, for everybody watching and listening, there's so many great moments in the book and in this new live album. And so we end here. What comes next? It's been what, 6 years since the last record, I guess. Are you working on anything new?
I'm almost done with a new solo record, and I'm very, very pleased with it. It wasn't easy to do because of COVID, because of travel restrictions, because of not wanting to be in a room with 4 or 5 other people, and so it was done. A lot of it was done remotely, and it was been a great process, and I'm very pleased with how it sounds, because my producer, Todd Caldwell, who is also my keyboard player, he wanted it to sound exactly like a live record, that 5 kids were in the same room playing at the same time. That was the difficulty, to try and make that illusion. I know that, some of the people that I played on the record were thousands of miles away, different, right? But still, it sounds like 4 or 5 guys playing rock and roll in the studio.
I cannot wait to hear it.
That's going to come out probably in about 4 months.
All right. That's not long at all. So that's great. No. And here we are back in that moment, that we were talking about earlier in the early 70s. I mean, you're still putting out great music. Cross is still putting out great music. Neil is, everybody's still putting out just great music, and it's so great to hear from you. So, Graham, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this today. It's been a great honor.
Thank you very much, Kyle. We'll talk later.
All right. Take care. We'll see you.
Bye-bye.